love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Ready to bring you a great show today. I have none other than AD Drew. He's on the road, but finding a way to get into it, so you'll hear his voice and you'll have his picture as he's calling the game. I like that. We have Brian Fulford. So we have the team from Sports Rap, as they do, and they'll be prepared to give you this show, their show, I should say, this evening, where they'll close out not just the games of the week, but basically the regular season. They'll be able to officially call it a close, and then they will find a way, if you would, to make sure that you know how to stretch it out and give you an opening chapter of next week's game, which happens to be the SWAC championship game. We've known for weeks that it will feature Southern and Jackson State, both of them coming off wins the previous week, and winning streaks for that matter. We have none other than Dave. Dave is in the building giving us the independent report as he follows all HBCUs, previously of the MEAC. I know sometimes they like to give him a hard time over that HBCU Nightly, but he is all things HBCU sports. Then we have BJ Jones getting ready to board a plane, so we'll have him for the first segment a little bit, if you would, to tell us about the Bayou Classic. We've already heard the reports of the attendance of 65, so kicking a little butt there for sure, and give his in-depth analysis, as only one could, from not only outside the game, but one who played the game. So he's also celebrating a little bit. So even though he can't see it, I will make sure that he gets the requisite cigar for winning, as we do those folks that come in. So congratulations to Southern Jaguars on the win in the Bayou Classic yesterday. Shout out to Alabama State. We did that on Thursday as Drew had his concerns with Tuskegee. And shout out to both Drew and Bryan in terms of the Rattlers getting it done against the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M. With that being said, welcome to episode 559 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU dash for all things HBCU sports for institutions large and small. From the NAIA to the NCAA, we share insights for the information on HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live, as we always do, in celebrating the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, multi-Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper. And we are in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas, since I am gainfully employed, serving as the interim dean in the College of Education. I make sure that they are always celebrated and worthy of notation. With that being said, gentlemen, I'm taking privilege that this week is one to celebrate for multiple reasons, but none other than that I feel a cold front. You know, it's that time of the year. Well, it often gets extremely cold. And, you know, in a couple of days, namely December 4th, I certainly, and Charles, Mike, will celebrate the coldest and the oldest as that train comes rolling down the track. So I just wanted to make sure you all understood.
I was wondering where that was going. I was like,
I knew exactly where it was going. I got enough offers in my family to know exactly where it was going. I got enough of them in my family right now as it is.
we have some good brothers, analytic, as we like to say, and I like to celebrate them as they found that they will come out. But we'll do the church and kind of say amen on that. But right now, it's all about us. Just letting you know. With that being said, I'm gonna go to my first friend over there, BJ Jones. Again, we understand your travails, but we want to say welcome to the show and thank you.
Oh man, thank you, Doc, for having me, man. It's been a while, man. Glad to be on the lab with you and the fellas this morning.
Good deal. So give us a little assessment, just in general. Obviously, I know you're in the business of any win is a good win, particularly when it's over your rivals. But just give us a little of the experience. You were there in the stadium live, obviously celebrating with, I'm sure, some of your teammates, your family and friends, and a lot of things. But it doesn't just have to be the game, but give us the atmosphere for those that weren't able to attend in the stadium or in the event itself. If you would, just give us a little analysis on that.
Yeah, so we got down on Friday evening. We got here about 5:00 and went to the hotel. And once we got to the hotel, man, once you got in the downtown area of New Orleans, the Central Business District, as they call it, man, you could just see the Bayou Classic flags up on the lamp poles and people everywhere, man. You saw a bunch of Southern gear, a bunch of Grambling gear. And that evening, man, we were actually at the bar at the hotel, and there was a few Oklahoma fans that came in to watch Oklahoma play LSU, and they were just saying that they had been in town since earlier that Friday, and they were completely blown away that FCS football was this big. They said they had heard about FCS football, have been to a couple of games. 4,000 or 5,000 people show up, and it's much to do about nothing. But they were blown away, and they understand that hey, they've been to the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans back when Oklahoma played Alabama, and they were saying that hey, this is bigger. Without a shadow of doubt, this is bigger. So talk to them for a little while, man. I tell anybody, man, if Wakanda was a place, it would be New Orleans on Friday before the Bayou Classic, just to see the paraphernalia. You see the Howard shirts, Tennessee State.
That's right.
You almost see all the schools in the SWAC represented, but then you start seeing HBCUs from everywhere, man, Fisk and everywhere on that Friday. And then Saturday, man, game day. One of the things, the game has moved up, so it's not that 4 p.m. kickoff anymore. It's a 1 p.m. kickoff. Doc, we party a little hard on Friday, so we have a little trouble getting into the stadium on time on Saturday. But man, once the stadium, man,
it is New Orleans.
It is New Orleans.
Man, but once it filled up, man, it was good to see everybody, man. Got opportunity to see Doug Williams, see Shaq Harris, see head coach Pete Richardson, who was my head coach, see a couple of teammates. And the atmosphere of the Bayou Classic is second to none. That atmosphere was electric, and I wouldn't say it was electric until Gremlins fans complained about the offense. I heard it all day. Southern's fans complained about the offense. I heard it all day. Matter of fact, someone reached over to me and said, "Hey, we were standing on the field. Said, hey, Fredericks learned offense on the dually, didn't he?" I was like, "Yeah, it shows." We
were joking. He was talking about, the Prairie View folks had similar comments when he was over there. You just,
but all offensively, man, looks. Southern had a lot of what you call empty calories, man. A lot of drop passes. Quarterback position looks a lot better. Jalen Woods, freshman quarterback from right here in Atlanta, Woodward Academy. He was a heralded kid coming out of Atlanta. You saw why. He has the arm talent. This receiver's got to catch the ball when he gets it to him. But just overall, man, solid game. Prayers out to the young man from Grambling that was injured on yesterday. See that he's out of the hospital and he's good to go. So that's great news there. But man, just overall, man, good win. Um, the kids talked about immediately after the game. Jackson, Jackson State, Jackson, Mississippi. Took a picture of a few of the guys with the trophy on yesterday. And they reminded, hey, we held up the Western Division championship trophy 2 weeks ago. We got the Bayou Classic trophy now.
Nice.
But there's a big trophy that we're after. And that completes the journey. And they let them know that this is not done. And that's their mentality coming into this week. So if you're a Southern Jaguar fan or former player, you got to be excited on how Coach Graves got this team focused. He talked about it in the press conference. There's some more trophies that we set out to hold up, to hoist, and the job ain't done. And that's the message around this football team and this program right now.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Let me go to you, Brian. We had the chance to really go over this in a little bit on Thursday to talk about the Tuskegee, Alabama State. So we won't belabor that. Obviously, I'll give an update. But you had a chance to debut at home in terms of BRAGG Stadium. I know it's a little different in terms of a Friday game, particularly past Thanksgiving. That's something historically you've done before, but it's a long chapter that had switched when the big Florida Classic moved up a week. And at that time, in a lot of ways, it was about being prepared to have the opportunity to go to the playoffs. That's a little bit changed. Obviously, the goal is to get to the SWAC championship game so you can get the Celebration Bowl. With that being said, tell us a little bit about that victory, big win. Obviously, anytime you win at home again, you don't apologize for that. You got to win over a game, Alabama A&M team. What were your thoughts on that matchup? So we can kind of close out on that as well.
Well, first thing I'll say, Doc, it was cold, wet. It reminded me so much of the SWAC championship game a year earlier.
Wow.
I mean, it was for the true rattlers. It was for the true fans.
Below 50 degrees is cold to y'all, man.
Yes, that's 50 degrees was freezing, Dave.
Dave, we know you live in a place that is foreign to us. We understand. You used to. We still hadn't gotten there yet. We still Southern brothers.
Yeah. Look, I was there 3 hours before kickoff, and the parking lot was empty, and I was nervous. I had all I heard was Drew in the background saying, "I told you, wasn't but 5,000 people." But thankfully, Rattler Nation showed up. There was over 10,000 people, 10,887, by the way. And the Marching 100 was even there, 130 band members of the 290.
That made it big.
290 came back, and they were in attendance. So, I mean, as far as the game, it was surprising that it started off quickly with a lot of scoring. It got kind of murky late in the ball game, and it kind of slowed down. I was really surprised that it did. I don't know if officiating was kind of I don't want to get fined, so I'm not going to complain about the officiating.
Yeah, because it won't be the SWAC officer fine you. It's going to be me. I'm a fine.
Yeah. So I understood there was a moment even with a particular call, Coach Cozy. I've never seen him.
I thought he was going to get the penalty himself.
He rode the official for about a good 5 minutes on a call, and but at the end of the day, it was a good win for FAMU. 2 in a row, won homecoming, beat Bethune, started a new streak, and it's a good stepping place into the future for Cozy. I think Coach Cozy is going to get a chance to kind of really define who he is as a coach, who he wants to be as a coach, what he wants the program to be. And I mean, yes, we're no longer he's no longer living in the shadows of the home win streak and all the stuff, all the greatness, all the good things that Coach Simmons had built. So I'm excited for the future. And I think we got a couple of players who might have a chance to play on Sundays. Really excited about that. And hey, we're ready for recruiting season. You know, a lot of transfers. Florida's a beautiful place to play, folks. Beautiful place to play. So,
Drew and Dave, I'm gonna save you for this next segment. I'm gonna get quickly into this. A lot of comments on Tennessee State, good season, and I have in the latter part of the show, I want us to discuss some things and a question I have specific about their season, and people saying it's not discussed enough. And in a lot of ways, I'd agree, but I think that's purposeful and something that they need to consider. What does that mean in terms of where they are and where they go? So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. But quickly, we did have two mid-major games yesterday with the number 2 Virginia Union Panthers. They defeated Lenoir-Rhyne Bears 44-12 was the final score there in the Division II playoff second round. That means they will move on. Congratulations to the Panthers. And it'll be interesting on Tuesday to see what this does with the rankings, because the number 1 team that was the 4 seed in the tournament, Miles Golden Bears, lost to the number 1 seed, Valdosta State Blazers, 33-17. We talked about Coach Jackson and his connection to HBCUs, previously alum and a player at Texas Southern University. They defeated the Bears 33-17. So guess what? The next matchup will feature Virginia Union Panthers traveling to see Valdosta State. So if there is a change this weekend, it'll be interesting to see the final week. Depending on the scores there, some of the voters probably will look at that to see the score differential. And if there's a change this week, will it hold steady next week, depending on a win or a loss by Virginia Union Panthers? Everybody understands how CIAA dominated SIC. Will that all hold at the end? But I'm fascinated to see on Tuesday what this will look like for the mid-majors. So with that being said, on the other side, we had a couple of those matchups. You had Alabama State Hornets defeating Tuskegee Golden Tigers 34-6. They improved to 7-5, 5-3. And you got Florida A&M defeats the number 8 Alabama A&M Bulldogs. They improved to 7-5, 5-3. Alabama A&M drops to 6-6. Number 5 Southern Jaguars defeat Grambling State Tigers 24-14. They improved to 8-4, 7-1 as they get ready to play in the SWAC championship game. Tennessee State Tigers lost to Montana Grizzly 41-27. Game that kept a lot of us up that watched that. They fall to 9-4, 6-2. Great season. Special teams was big in that matchup, but Tennessee State's made plays after it looked like they were out. They found a way to get back in it. North Carolina Central did not play in their season. It's complete. South Carolina State Bulldogs did not play. They sit and wait as they are headed to Atlanta for the Celebration Bowl. Number 1, Jackson State Tigers did not play. They sit and wait to next week as they host the SWAC championship game against currently number 5, the Southern Jaguars. With that being said, I did want to say that Miles Golden Bears, they fall at 10-3, while the Virginia Panthers improved to 10-3 in terms of their overall record. With that, we'll take our first break, come back on the other side. We'll get some thoughts by these gentlemen on those scores and matchups, anything came out. And then we will get into the poll rankings before we continue with the show. So stick with us. We'll be right back after this first break.
HBCU football fans, this year's Cricket Celebration Bowl has a new date. A champion will rise at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on December 14th as the MEAC and SWAC champions meet once again. Join us in Atlanta for championship football, interactive fan experiences, and iconic marching bands. It's an HBCU family reunion that you don't want to miss. See who will be crowned the next HBCU national champion. For event and ticket information, visit the Celebration Bowl.
Looking for the ultimate cultural experience of 2025? The Zora Outdoor Festival of the Arts is where you need to be. From January 31st to February 2nd, Eatonville, Florida will come alive with incredible live performances from the Levert Experience and the Barcade. Immerse yourself in interactive art. Shop from over 80 vendors. Take a journey through history with a new version of Florida. And enjoy family-friendly STEM activities. Festival. It's a celebration of Eatonville's rich cultural heritage. Visit zorafestival.org for tickets.
ESPN Events Band of the Year, a title reserved for the absolute best in the world of HBCU marching bands. A season-long competition that culminates in Atlanta on Friday, December 13th. Drum majors, percussion, drill, auxiliaries, musicality. All aspects will be adjudicated by expert judges in the world of college bands. 4 bands will qualify for the big stage, where national champions will be crowned. Follow us on social media for ranking updates throughout the season. And join us at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on December 13th. For event and ticket information, visit Band.
At AutoMasters LLC, our mission is to serve our community by providing quality automobiles at affordable prices. All of our vehicles are inspected and certified to offer you the confidence in knowing you have a quality vehicle. Our goal is to provide you with a seamless process and positive experience for your automobile purchase. Financing recommendations and specific vehicle inquiries are available at your request. You can find us at www.automasters06.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, please feel free to contact Terrence Miles at 601-927-7794. And oh yeah, tell him Sonia sent you.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gonna teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Mills inside the HBCU Sports Lab. We still have BJ Jones for one last segment. We have AD Drew and Dave. So AD Drew, I'm gonna get over there to you, and just any final thoughts before we get in this poll ranking. Any final thoughts on the end of the regular season? Long, but in a lot of ways a great regular season. Obviously, part of that was Tennessee State getting into the playoffs. They lost in their first round of the playoffs and on a road game, Montana, in a nice, cold, crisp West Coast night. Any thoughts that you wanted to share before we get into this final week 14 poll ranking?
Let's not bury the lead that we do have a second game going on next Saturday with Virginia Union playing Valdosta State in the Division II playoff. So let's definitely not bury that. And also, let's see. I think I counted 4 post fights, 2 in-game fights yesterday, all on national TV, most of them on linear TV. And they say we got a problem with HBCU football. I don't know who they are, but they need to reevaluate.
I think flag planting should be banned.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it'll make it to the championship week next week with the NCAA. I know, and a lot of things are slow, but I wouldn't be surprised. Certainly, maybe even the bowl season, but if not, neither of those in the off season, is without a question that that will be something of the past, and at best, you might be able to wave your flag on your own sideline, which I think wouldn't be a problem. But for folks being able to go all over the stadium, including the middle of the field, I think that's something that those that are in supervisor positions certainly do not want to be a part of that game. So great point all around that you made there, Drew. With that, Dave, your thoughts. I think you gave one of them. You ready to ban flag waving, particularly putting it at the other team's logo.
That's where we're at. I think wasn't it 3 of them that started that, if I recall correctly?
Oh yeah.
So for me, I stayed up and watched the whole Tennessee State Montana game.
Same here.
Tennessee State had plentiful opportunities. They, for some reason, they just kept kicking to that All-American punt returner, which was baffling the entire time. But they had a phenomenal season. We discussed about the fact they're not discussed that most likely because they're not in the MEAC or the SWAC, not in one of the HBCU conferences. But that shouldn't overshadow the fact of how great of a season that they had. I mean, they took down a top 15 team. They pretty much started the playoffs last week against SEMO, and they ended up doing what they needed to do to get there and went up against a good Montana football team that gave them everything they had in that cold weather, because it looked cold when I was watching it. It was very cold. watched the interview with Eddie George post game. He owned up to the fact that he didn't have his team prepared for that crowd noise, even though it wasn't the typical crowd since it was right after Thanksgiving, but it was still loud nevertheless. So shout out to Tennessee State for an outstanding season.
How ironic is that they're not prepared for the crowd noise?
Hey now, AD.
Maybe if
They haven't played in front of a crowd.
Exactly. Hard to be
Yes, it's kind of hard to compare when you can't get your own folks there, which is something I bring up. I mean, I know it's easy to say that it should be more talked about Tennessee State. I think they have their own podcast, or at least they had it one time, if it's going on. We purposely created a Wednesday independent show to talk about them. And we have a Tennessee State person, Brandon King, that's involved with this show. So miss me with all this. We not talking about Tennessee State enough. Hell, we talk about it weekly. And as long as they continue to win, we're going to talk about them. And unfortunately, even if they lose, we're going to talk about them. So I don't want to hear all that. I think it's bigger than what we care to admit, and we need to understand when the culture talks. The culture talks. It's something going on with Tennessee State that their personal fans are telling them. There's something going on with the HBCU diaspora because that's a lot of their own doing. Folks purposely here on Inside the HBCU Sports Lab discuss all HBCUs up and down from mid-majors to majors. Again, we have a Wednesday show that you can check out with Dave that leads it. We got Brandon King, and we have a Hampton person on, and we actually have two, and they switch off. They talk about it. So if you're not watching that show, that's on you. There's a reason. Because it's out there. So I take a little umbrage about this talk that we don't talk about enough. You all don't talk about enough, and there needs to be a question within yourself of why you, the fans, are not talking about it, and even they fans, more importantly, are not involved. So let's get into the major division. Week 14, top 7 rankings of what this looks like. We're closing out on things, and we basically have a focus with essentially 3 teams left. But as it goes, nobody dropped out this week. Receiving votes, still Morgan State Bears. It's flipped a little bit. The Morgan State shifting to previous week, they were at 9. Now they move up to 8, even though they didn't play based on what other teams did and how they finished out their regular season last week. They're at 6-6, 3-2, have 133 points. At essentially number 9, the Alcorn State Braves, 6-6, 5-3, obviously finished off their season last week with a tough loss to their rival Jackson State, but they have 132 points. Alabama A&M Bulldogs, with their loss, is one of the major calls in terms of how things flipped in terms of those receiving votes. Even though they lost the close game, they did fall, and they fall to the 10th spot as they end the season at 6-6 and 3-5 in the conference race. Getting up to the top 7, at number 7, you have Alabama State Hornets, 7-5 as they did win. So they improve overall, stay at 5-3 in the conference race, 167 points, and they remain at number 7. Bringing us to number 6. Florida A&M Rattlers, 7-5, 5-3, big win at home to close out the season. And they maintain the 6th spot with 169 points as they close out the season in conference play at 5-3. At number 5, this may surprise some people. I'll be interested to think whether Southern Jaguars should have moved up. They actually stay where they are at 8-4, 7-1. They have 179 points as they remain at 5, as I said. Meaning that number 4, Tennessee State actually stays where they are. The votes, as you see, have narrowed down between Tennessee State and Southern. 9-4 is where the Tigers fall after the loss in the playoffs. 6-2 in conference race they had, 183 points. So you see that it's only a 4-point differential between Southern Jaguars and Tennessee State. So Southern Jaguars closed the gap, but wasn't enough to jump them. Bringing us to number 3. North Carolina Central Eagles maintain that spot at 8-3, 4-1, 188 points. People were looking last week to see if they got in the playoffs. Obviously, everybody else knows that they did not. What may be one of the bigger talking points is the fact that they weren't even the last 4. So they were quite a bit ways out of the playoffs. Not having that 12th game certainly hurt them, particularly if they played it and were able to get the win. They would have been at 9-3, but that was not to be. So they're not in the playoffs, and the chance to have two teams in the playoffs was not there. At number 2, you have South Carolina State Bulldogs, and they are at 9-2, 5-0. Certainly a great season. 5 first place votes, 224 points, and they remained at number 2 and were not able to strip away another win. A vote, I would say, from Jackson State, although they have 5 themselves. Jackson State stays at number 1, 10-2 on the season, 8-0, 6 first place votes, 225 points. So it's close. First matchup is 1 versus 5 in the SWAC championship game, and you have the number 2, at least this week, already sitting pretty in terms of the MEAC matchup. With that being said, I'm going to go to BJ Jones first as he's getting ready to move. I want to get his thoughts, and then if he needs to move on, we certainly understand. But BJ, tell me what your thoughts on the top 7 with this 1 versus 5 matchup for the SWAC championship game included in there.
Oh man, this is spot on. Now I have Tennessee State a little bit higher. In my poll, I got South Carolina State at 1, got Jackson State at 2, Tennessee State at 3, Central 4, Southern 5. But man, that's pretty much spot on. I think that this is the one of the years. Doc said this last night while watching Tennessee State. Man, it would have been nice to have Tennessee State, Jackson State, and that Southern Heritage Classic this year. Oh man, it would have been nice to have it, man. Yeah. Or worst case scenario, man, just another home, get it.
Home and home would even be better.
Oh man, tell me about it. But overall, man, solid. Solid. It's interesting to see where Alabama State is going for. From an offensive standpoint, going through the quarterbacks, Eddie Robinson found a way to keep that team competitive. Yeah. It wasn't always pretty, but I saw them in person on Thursday, and they don't have a lot of seniors on that football team. They're bringing back a lot. So you talk about teams to look at next year, it's probably going to be down there in Montgomery because they're bringing back quite a bit.
Yeah, we know if they can find a quarterback, get a quarterback, stay around and keep them healthy. Think about this. Now, they are a botch kick, and I know people can go the other way with this, but they're a botch kick from being 8-4.
Yeah.
Yeah, so great points there. Great points there. BJ, appreciate you being able to be a part of this and jumping in. You bring so much to the table. Look forward to you tonight and HBCU Nightly after the Sports Wrap show. Pretty much to see what's going to be going on and you all talking about some of these key matchups and life. Interesting as people that did not see HBCU Nightly, Joshua Sims, Jr., if you would, Senior, now in terms of his thoughts on Tennessee State and his, croning, I'll call it like that, in terms of talking to them directly about their desires and what they need to consider. I thought that was masterful in a lot of ways. With that being said, I'm going to go to the first part of the team, if you would, in terms of Bryan on Sports Wrap. What are your thoughts in terms of this matchup?
I'm sorry.
The poll ranking.
No problems with the poll. I haven't changed anything since the last week because I wanted to wait for the regular season to end. But there is a possibility. I think I'm probably going to move Tennessee State up to at least above North Carolina Central once everything is all said and done. And then I'm kind of, I had South Carolina State as my number 1 team. That won't change until after the Celebration Bowl. So even if Jackson State does win, hey, they'll be number 2. And then you can go to the Celebration Bowl and beat my number 1 team, South Carolina State. And if you do, I'll put Jackson State number 1. But until that day, they'll be number 2.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm going to go to the other part of the Sports Wrap. AD Drew, your thoughts on the poll ranking in week 14?
I am trying to figure out how a team who is not playing football at this time of the season is ranked ahead of 2 teams that are still playing football at this time of the season. Central should be 5. There's no way Central should be 5, especially when you consider most of the other variables are similar. Uh, by the way, who was the only team to play a non-NCAA team of those top 5? That would be North Carolina Central. So that puts them, that automatically drops them below everybody else. All those other variables being the same. I've got Tennessee State 3, despite the loss yesterday, because the loss occurred in the playoffs versus Southern's victory, which occurred in the regular season. I'm weighing a playoff loss a little bit more than a regular season victory at this point in time in the season. 1 and 2 are debatable. Tomato, whatever, whichever one that you like. I personally have South Carolina State sitting right there right now. Unlike Bryan, I may reevaluate it after the SWAC championship game, but it is what it is at that point in time. But should Southern pull off the upset, then there's no question that South Carolina State would be number 1 going into the Celebration Bowl.
Certainly, great points there. So, if I'm hearing correctly, you really don't knock a team if they lose in the playoffs, but I'd imagine you give them credit about winning the playoffs. I think that's an interesting scenario. Even though I think there is an argument that even without that I can see where you would bump 4 and 5 up and drop Central.
Well, like I say, it's the fact that this loss occurred to a Montana team who is number 14 in the nation, going into it at what's Grambling ranked? About number 1 something. Yeah, a victory over a team in the bottom third of the FCS ratings versus a loss to a team in the top 20. I'm going to give you a loss to a team in the top 20, especially if they cover those 2 punts and keep themselves in the game. You know, everything else was even throughout that ball game.
Yeah, again, I give you credit for it, but a lot of people can also talk about the fact that they scored on turnovers and not necessarily offensively. So it's what your eyes are pleasing to. But I think a rivalry game is a rivalry game. We've seen that in terms of even at the other levels that rivalry games are different no matter what a team comes in there. So I think there's a statement to be made for that, and we can't just gloss over that. I think oftentimes we get in love with the playoffs, which is a postseason, which I agree with. It's something that you should look at it, but I don't get too married about it. Just personally, for my vote that I put in there, a loss is a loss. If you're in the playoffs, that means you're supposed to be good. You're supposed to be able to play a team. So I'm not going to give you no extra brownie points because you lose to a good team in the playoffs. Either you win it or you lose it. You're going to be Virginia Union, you go to the playoffs and you win, you get credit for it, or you're going to be Miles College. You play a number 1 ranked team, but you lost. And that's not good. Dave, your thoughts?
I've been on the South Carolina State should be number 1 train for a couple weeks now. No, it's not a knock at Jackson. I just think the dominance that they've had in that conference has been a sight to see. I'm looking forward to see whether it's Jackson State or Southern that matchup, so they can just prove the point of who's number 1. I agree with AD. The school down the road's got to move down to 5. No, I do. And it's funny. Last night after the game between Tennessee State and Montana, I said, "Man, Tennessee State would have an argument for 2," and there were people replying they might be 1. And I'm like, when you start thinking about how would those guys compete against the other HBCUs compete against Montana, because Tennessee State was in that game. They battled. I mean, if they just had a special team, they might have had a shot to win. So I would just flip. I would move Tennessee State and Southern up, move the school down the road down, flip South Carolina State to number 1. So
I like Tennessee State doesn't have a chance to choice. I mean, they could be in one of the 2 conferences.
Look, man, I can't control the administrators.
They can also schedule team.
Yeah, I guess they trying. I mean, they're one of the only ones that didn't play a non-Division 1 opponent. That's a factor too, right?
I like that. That is a good one.
Yeah,
so that's a full credit there. I give that. I do appreciate that part. With that being said, great dialogue, great comments in terms of thinking points that all should be considered in terms of those fans that are looking at the poll rankings. But they are what they are, voters, and they are the Week 14 standings, 1 through 7. 7, Alabama State Hornets. 6, Florida A&M Rattlers. 5, Southern Jaguars. 4, Tennessee State Tigers. 3, North Carolina Central Eagles. 2, South Carolina State Bulldogs. And 1, the Jackson State Tigers. We'll take our next break. We'll come back on the other side. We're going to have a chance for you to listen for those that have not heard it in totality. And we'll get some talking points in terms of the Southwestern Athletic Conference Commissioner, Dr. Charles McCullough, and his report to the Southern University board yesterday. So we'll get your talks, and then we'll let that play. When we come back, we'll have another break, and we'll come back and get the talking points from these members on that dialogue. And I have some specific questions I want to ask them as we get into it after we play that video. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this next break.
HBCU football fans, a champion will rise at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on December 14th. MEAC champions, SWAC champions, the Cricket Celebration Bowl, crowning an HBCU national champion. For event and ticket information, visit thecelebrationbowl.com.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Looking for the ultimate cultural experience of 2025? The Zora Outdoor Festival of the Arts is where you need to be. From January 31st to February 2nd, Eatonville, Florida will come alive with incredible live performances from the Levert Experience and the Bar Cave. Immerse yourself in interactive art. Shop from over 80 vendors. Take a journey through history with a new virtual tour app. And enjoy family-friendly STEM activities. Plus, don't miss the unforgettable R&B tribute to the legends, honoring talents such as Whitney Houston, Marvin Gaye, and Luther Vandross. This is more than a festival. It's a celebration of Eatonville's rich cultural heritage. Visit zorafestival.org for tickets.
ESPN Band of the Year returns to Atlanta on December 13th. 4 marching bands will qualify for the big stage, where 2 national champions will be crowned. Follow us on social media for rankings updates throughout the season. And join us at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on December 13th for event and ticket information.
Compress the analytic data with your hip-hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a loss, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab. I believe we're going to have the video playing shortly.
There's a lot on the line. The Southwestern Athletic Conference is as strong today as it has been in quite some time. 6 years ago, we had the institutions having to give money back to the SWAC just so we could make payroll and pay the light bills. I'm pleased to say that we are now in a position to where the SWAC is the most funded FCS conference in the nation. In addition, we were able to distribute back to the institutions over the past 2 years a little more than $28 million, which is more than any other FCS conference in the nation. So as we continue to grow and as we continue to build, we're trying to integrate ourselves in every aspect of intercollegiate athletics. For the first time in over 2 decades, our chairman of the board, Dr. Quentin Ross, he now sits on the Division I NCAA Board of Directors, which means that every decision that comes through the NCAA, the SWAC will have a vote. We now have 28 individuals on NCAA committees, whether that's academics, whether that's compliance. So as we have these issues that arrive in the past, we did not have any representation. SWAC has representation at every level within the NCAA, up to and including the Division I Board of Finance, where the $1.3 billion that is allocated, again, Dr. Quentin Ross is on that subcommittee. So we have integrated ourselves and we've continued to grow and build. So as you see, all of this movement within Division I, where conferences are starting to fold, the Southwestern Athletic Conference is as strong today as it has ever been. We continue to lead in attendance 48 years out of the last 49 years, and that has helped us. So thank you to Southern University. Thank you to Grambling State and all of the SWAC fans. That is the reason why we are as strong as we are today. So your conference is strong, and we're going to be here for another 100 years. As it relates to the house settlement, I know you've heard a lot about the house settlement. This is name, image, and likeness. And ultimately what that means is it's going to be allowable for institutions now to be able to give name, image, and likeness money directly to their student athletes. So what does that mean for Southern University? That means that there's going to be an influx of student athletes that are going to be looking for name, image, and likeness payments, where you normally would have to go get a sponsor, a Dodge sponsorship or a Chrysler sponsorship, what have you. You can now do that directly. This is going to come into effect once the judge passes all of the tests. And there are a couple of tests, there are a couple of challenges, but we're thinking in April, and this is going to be in effect for the upcoming fall year. So as you know, we have a patchwork of state laws. We have 50 states with 50 different laws about name, image, and likeness. All have to be on the outside. Now they're coming inside. What does that mean? We already have one institution within the Southwestern Athletic Conference have committed name, image, and likeness dollars to their student athletes, which means that you're now getting ready to compete for that quarterback, where you were competing against, let's say, Southeastern Louisiana or McNeese State on the field. You're now getting ready to compete in the recruiting, and you're gonna need to be able to have some name, image, and likeness dollars set aside. In addition to that, the settlement was $2.8 billion. Now that $2.8 billion will not go to the SWAC student athletes that participated in the sport of football and basketball. It's gonna go to those FBS Power 5 athletes. So those that are already in the NFL getting paid millions of dollars, they're getting ready to get another $2.8 billion. The Southwestern Athletic Conference contribution to that $2.8 billion is $30 million. Even though we didn't have anybody participating in FBS and we did not participate in sharing of those dollars. Southern University's portion of that is going to be $3 million over the next 10 years. So some of the revenue that you're getting from the NCAA, some of the revenue that you've gotten from the NCAA is going to go away. So I'm here to say there's going to be some challenging times from a financial standpoint. I want the board to kind of understand what this means. And the last part of this, and as I take my seat, we're getting ready to do away with what we call full scholarships as far as scholarship limitations are concerned. So in FCS at your football team, you can give up to 63 scholarships. That's getting ready to go away. We're getting ready to go to roster limits now. So football, the roster limit is going to be 105. Baseball is going to be 35. So you can give up to that, or you can stay where you are, and schools are going to have an option to opt in and opt out. So we're going to develop a best practice memo document that we're going to give to all of the presidents and chancellors to kind of help you guide. I'll be here as a resource, but kind of want to let you know that we are in a really good spot from a revenue standpoint. We're going to be just fine, but it is going to take some additional effort. We're going to have some name, image, and likeness dollars on the inside. We'll work with you to help develop that, but make no mistake about it. We are on top, and we're going to continue to stay on top. And as I take my seat, I do want to say a couple of things about Grambling State University. Mr. President, President Gallo is the reason why I am commissioner of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. So I always like to give a public thank you for having confidence in me, seeking me out, and guiding me through the process. And I will say about President Martin LaMelle, he is the right person for Grambling State University. There could not have been a better person hired for the presidency of Grambling State, but as good as he is as an administrator, he is equally talented and equally, I'm trying to think of the right ad. He is as good of a person individually as he is as an administrator. There could not be a better administrator, a better person to lead Grambling State. And with the help of President Gallo, the reaction that I heard from this board about the excitement of the legislature, Grambling State, Southern University working together for the state of Louisiana, both institutions are going to win. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on the gridiron tomorrow.
I think
Certainly. Wanted to get in a little bit of discussion on it. I thought that was important for those that have heard parts about that into the discussion cycle, particularly in the social media echo chamber of HBCUs. I wanted to get these thoughts from you all in regards to that. So I have a couple of questions where we kind of break down the different components of what he talked about. Obviously, one of the things that jumps out, first things he talked about is most funded FCS conference. You talked about funds over the last 2 years is $28 million in distributions. Obviously, there's a step in terms of funds usually increasing over a year based on contract agreements. But if we simplify it, that's essentially about $14 million a year, or $1.16 million plus to each member institution. If we break it down just on 12 members, dividing it evenly in terms of that distribution. Obviously, that's up and down a little bit based on the particulars of how the SWAC distributes that. And I won't get into that for this show. I do have some insight of what that looks like, but I think it would be just simple to talk about that. So if you would, Dave, in terms of an independent program, I think this probably has your interest just in general of HBCUs. But what were your thoughts when you heard about the distribution numbers, particularly for FCS conference?
The first thing I thought was I was stunned of how much the SWAC was getting, which is great for the SWAC because that is a lot of money. I'm like the CAA is among the highest from a distribution standpoint from where A&T is, and they're not even I don't think they're a tenth of that. They might be a little over a tenth of that from that standpoint, I believe. So that's really good from that standpoint. It makes me, but the SWAC having 12 teams, very strong brands from not just from an HBCU standpoint, but from a national standpoint. I think that helps when it comes to leveraging and having some major markets as well. That all matters from that standpoint when it comes to negotiating those media deals. So that's good for the SWAC. I'm happy that they're getting that type of money.
Great points there. I'm gonna go back to you, AD Drew. You can talk about that, but as you talk about that, also give me your thoughts in terms of one of his next points that he highlighted was the engagement by SWAC leadership, throughout, whether it's from the commissioners, presidents, chancellors, ADs, SIDs, SWAs, and compliance even folks that the SWAC is throughout the NCAA has members, including at the highest level in terms of the board of directors. Specifically, he talked about President Ross being on the finance committee, which deals with $1.3 billion. He also talked about 28 individuals on the NCAA committees. In terms of at least being a representative, somebody that has been in the conference office, at least as a coach, and now in terms of where you are at Morehouse, can you talk about the importance, or is it important even, to have this type of membership of people at least having their voice at the table, particularly NCAA as things move forward? I think Drew's having some problems with the audio, so I'm gonna go to you, Brian, for that question. You get to double the duty and hold it down for your man, AD Drew.
Well, in your question, I was thinking ahead because I figured that question was for Drew, but I think
he's back. He can answer it, so I'll hold off. All
right. First of all, Dr. Cavil, before I even answer that question, I want to say this is why FAMU joined the SWAC and FWB Act. It's for opportunities that this conference is bringing to the institution. Number one.
Great point.
Number two, having not in college athletics, but in my previous employment, having been on members of various organizations and been on committees such as finance committees and things like that, having representation at these tables are very, very important. There are a couple of committees, no matter where you want to be at, you want to be on them. Any committee that has to do with the distribution of money, you want to have representation on that committee. Any committee that has to do with how rules are made, such as the compliance committee, you definitely want representation of that. The fact that we have seats at those tables are important, especially when you're representing quote unquote smaller institutions, so that your voice is not heard when these big boys are making decisions that will ultimately affect you. Too bad that the one decision that could have helped us. Uh, and it was interesting when they talked about the $3 million that the institution will have to pay back. People misheard that initially when Dr. McClellan said that they started clapping. I'm like, why are y'all clapping? That's money you have to pay back. And he did a good job clarifying that this money will not come directly out of the institution, but out of the distribution that you get from the conference office. So, but once again, having a voice in that is ultimately important for our institutions.
Great points. Brian, the second part of that, I wanted to get into it, but I want to get your specific thoughts on the House settlement NIL, particularly from a perspective that institutions can now pay directly. And there's this question between operating as a limited resource institution, but seeing where athletics is going, if they can continue to maintain this distribution for the institutions, how do you weigh that in terms of taking that type of revenue, putting it back to invest in athletic programs, facility updates, things of that nature, maintenance if you needed to in some parts, versus maybe using some of that money in terms of the ability now, NIL, obviously finding other monies to support that framework of the settlement. And then we'll end with everybody getting a chance to talk about what Drew kind of started to talk about is the breakdown of what that means. But before we get to that, what are your thoughts on this new world of utilizing NIL money that used to have to come from outside the institution, now being able to be utilized inside the institution based on the lawsuit probably starting in fall 2025 if she sews everything up?
Yeah, as I listened to that, I was glad that Dr. McClellan, went before the board. And I hope he gets an invitation. I hope other athletic directors saw that and sent an invitation to Dr. McClellan to come talk to their board. Like, for example, I would hope, AD Suggs at Florida A&M would invite Dr. McClellan to come speak to the Florida A&M Board of Trustees, because every board needs to understand what every athletic director is probably telling the boards or their groups that, hey, we need help. We need more money. We need more resources. We need more of a university involvement in helping our athletic departments grow in this new financial world. And I think they need to hear it directly from the commissioner in the same manner that he talked about, hey, we are one of the largest revenue generating conferences at the FCS level, but your board, you are going to have to do more and be more involved, more hands-on in helping your athletic departments in this new world of college athletics. If you still want to be a part of college athletics, if you want your programs to win the Bayou and go to the SWAC championship game and win the SWAC championship game and go to the Celebration Bowl, guess what? Southern, Florida A&M, all these other universities, you are going to have to invest more. You're going to have to provide more resources to your athletic department. So I was glad to see him do that, and I hope I hope there's a conference tour that he takes around to various boards and kind of let them know that this is needed. It's time for HBCUs, especially the board of trustees, to do more with their athletic department. So I thought that was good. I thought that was good, and I don't think in that moment there were so many questions that I had that I don't think the board members really knew what they were hearing in that moment. I felt like I don't think they really heard what they heard or knew what they heard, because if they had an idea, there would be more questions that would have been asked after Dr. McClellan's time. And maybe I don't know what the order of business was and how much time they allowed for that, but definitely that is a conversation that needs to be tabled. And those athletic committees that other boards have, they probably need to figure a way how to get more involved and be able to ask more follow-up questions. 105
is what I kept thinking about.
Yeah.
105.
Great points in terms of that. And I'm going to let you all answer that question before we close it up in terms of taking our last break and coming back on another question that's kind of a byproduct of that. With that being said, I think two things that you outlined in there is like half the SWAC membership, 6 of the members have their own autonomous board, and then other ones have state boards. So it'd be interesting to your point about him being able to go at least to those autonomous boards, which would be Texas Southern, obviously already doing Southern, Alabama State, FAMU, Bethune-Cookman, and both Alabama A&M and Alabama State in there. So that'll be fascinating to see kind of what that looks like. And the last question that kind of gets to the point you were talking about, both of you, David and Brian, and I'm sure AD has some thoughts on this too. And he started it when he talked about the $2.8 billion will not go to football or basketball in terms of the SWAC. That SWAC will have to pay $30 million over the next 10 years. That's essentially $3 million institution over the next 10 years. Some would say that's about $300K maybe a year. But the other part of that is moving from FCS 63 scholarships to being able to do the roster limits of 105 in football. He even talked about 35 in baseball. And what will that look for men's and women's basketball? We've talked about those numbers, but it kind of hits you again when you hear it from the commissioner of a conference talking about how you're going to facilitate that. What are your thoughts in terms of this new landscape in terms of roster limits versus scholarship limits? I'm going to start with you, David. Your thoughts on that?
I think for me, it ultimately boils down to that every university is going to have to start making some tough decisions on what's important and what's not important from that standpoint. When you start thinking about the cost of what it's going to take, like if you want to compete, you probably want to try to get as close to the roster limits as possible. Like particularly for the SWAC and the MEAC, you want to at least be comparable to everybody else within your conference from a roster limit standpoint, right? Mm-hmm. So if you know that Jackson State is trying to get to the 105, you want to have a legitimate shot, man, you probably need to go to 105, or you probably need to get to 105. And that's going to cost, that's going to be a new expense that they didn't have to take into account. So, and then we're talking about it from a football aspect, but like the commissioner said regarding baseball, and some of that's already impacting other institutions outside of the MEAC and SWAC. Like other decisions are being made when you talk about track and field and everything else. So you have to think about the entire whole from that standpoint and have to start making tough decisions on what's going to be important from an athletic standpoint and if you're ready to invest. Because now the student fees can't pay for everything. Like for most institutions, they pay for a lot of it, but I don't think the student fees is going to be able to pay for everything in this regard.
Good points. He did talk about best practice document that he shared. And I wonder, will that be something conference-wise to try to keep the integrity, balance of competition fair in terms of the president's chancellors working with the commissioner about where the conference is over a said period of time for each of these sports roster limits? Brian, your thoughts?
Here's my thought about roster limits. And I know, there are people who don't think we can afford 105. Now, you may not be able to afford 105 within the strains of the athletic department, but I'm curious. This is where I think universities are going to have to work with their admissions departments. And are there other means of scholarships and financial aid or grants, things of that nature, that are accessible to student athletes, high excelling student athletes? I mean, it is a university, and you still, while at some point you have some universities that have waivers for students who may be a little lower achieving, how about the universities that have students who are student athletes who are higher achieving? So maybe you don't give a full athletic scholarship, but maybe you're able to maybe do some things that baseball has been able to do, which is they kind of balance out academic scholarships with athletic scholarships. How about the world of football having to go to that model a little bit, where, hey, we want to get 40 more people on the roster, or let's say 20 more people, well, you get 65 scholarships, so now it's going to 105. That's 40, but
42
really,
more scholarships.
Yeah, so that's 40. But how about those scholarships being more academic based than more athletic based, and especially in sports like baseball, where I think the academics. I know for example, at Florida A&M, the academics among the baseball team have been relatively high, so you might be able to get more academic based scholarship money there. I think there's going to be there's some creative work that's going to have to happen. So I don't think all is lost. I don't think I don't think it's as bad as it initially sounds if you have administration and administrators who can work creatively with their university. So I think this is where the relationships that athletic directors have with the various stakeholders throughout the campus, this is where those relationships come in to be able to understand what can we create for our students, because at the end of the day, first, they are students, right? So let's try to find some ways in which we can help these students be athletes as well.
So then let me jump in for like a couple seconds. Because another thing that just dawned on me, and I just remembered, is that we're talking about this roster limit of 105 for football. It's going to impact everybody. Like the Matt Rule, the head coach in Nebraska, talked about how he expects about 30 to 40, 50 players to go into the portal because of the roster limits, because a lot of these schools keep way more than that. So you're going to get an influx of talent, and there's going to be a lot of folks looking for a home, because now that you have that roster limit, there's going to be less opportunity for a lot of these players. So it's going to be a trickle-down effect. You're going to see FBS players end up in FCS, and you're going to see FCS players end up in Division II, and so forth and so on.
Good point there. And talking about D2, AD Drew, I wanted you to add your thoughts from this. Talking about D2 programs, there's been this discussion from a lot of us, particularly of late in terms of MEAC, in terms of Division II HBCU programs moving up. Does this make it even more of a challenge in terms of that scenario when you have to look at obviously just the money associated moving from Division II to Division I, the new rule guidelines in terms of the cost of a transition, which was one thing, but now you're also talking about potentially increased in terms of roster limits. What are your thoughts in general on the roster limits, if you want to share that, if you were going that? But add on to that some thoughts in terms of what does it do for those D2 program, HBCU programs that we're even considering the transition to FCS Division I?
It really makes you stop or pause. Number one, I'm trying to see how you can convince what I call the people on the other side of campus. Not only do I have to figure out how I'm going to incorporate NIL into my institution, because now I don't have to necessarily have a collective outside the institution, but I'm also going to have to figure out how I'm going to increase roster spots and being able to get enough student athletes to draw into those roster spots, where have fun trying to convince the pencil pushers on how you're going to do that financially at an institution. You're going to really have fun trying to do that. What you're going to see, Dr. Cavil, is you're going to see institutions figure out, where am I going to be? While I not be able to get to that one roster as far as in football. I get it in basketball. You're gonna see
Drew, you're breaking up there, and I know you're getting into some great comments. We're gonna take this last break. We'll come back on the other side, and I go in a different direction. But please make sure you join into Sports Wrap, because I know Brian and AD will get into some of this discussion. I think the points that AD Drew are making are extremely important. So I want to make sure that
you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
You see institutions usually figure out which sports that they are going to be in. I may not be able to. It
just went bad. So we're going to take this last break, and we'll come back on the other side.
HBCU football fans, a champion will rise at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on December 14th. MEAC champions, SWAC champions, the Cricket Celebration Bowl, crowning an HBCU national champion. For event and ticket information, visit thecelebrationbowl.com.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Wrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Looking for the ultimate cultural experience of 2025? The Zora Outdoor Festival of the Arts is where you need to be. From January 31st to February 2nd, Eatonville, Florida will come alive with incredible live performances from the Levert Experience and the Bar Cave. Immerse yourself in interactive art. Shop from over 80 vendors. Take a journey through history with a new virtual tour app. And enjoy family-friendly STEM activities. Plus, don't miss the unforgettable R&B tribute to the legends, honoring talents such as Whitney Houston, Marvin Gaye, and Luther Vandross. This is more than a festival. It's a celebration of Eatonville's rich cultural heritage. Visit zorafestival.org for tickets.
ESPN Band of the Year returns to Atlanta on December 13th. 4 marching bands will qualify for the big stage, where 2 national champions will be crowned. Follow us on social media for rankings updates throughout the season. And join us at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on December 13th for event and ticket information.
At Automasters LLC, our mission is to serve our community by providing quality automobiles at affordable prices. All of our vehicles are inspected and certified to offer you the confidence in knowing you have a quality vehicle. Our goal is to provide you with a seamless process and positive experience for your automobile purchase. Financing recommendations and specific vehicle inquiries are available at your request. You can find us at www.automasters06.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, please feel free to contact Terrence Miles at 601-927-7794. And oh yeah, tell him Sonia sent you.
Compress the analytic data with your hip-hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a law, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil. We got Brandon King on for Tennessee State. Very busy man, very busy schedule, but I thought at the request of our lab listeners, a lot of folks wanted to hear about Tennessee State. So I thought who better to bring on to talk about Tennessee State than the Tennessee State guru representative, as we have tabbed him himself, Brandon King. So if you would, go ahead, Brandon, if you can. Talk about the game last night, your final thoughts on the season. And then I have an open question to the panel that I want to get everybody's thoughts on. But go ahead, Brandon.
Oof. Oh, and then we lost him.
So with that being said, let me go back to AD Drew. I think he said he switched devices. So we'll go to you in terms of the finishing off your thoughts on our last segment question in regards to potentially D2s looking to move up. How will this challenge them in that process?
I mean, it's definitely going to be a challenge financially now, even more than it was before, to make the move. And it's going to discourage a lot of people from moving up because until you get these finances with what's going on Division 1 level, it's going to be tough. And I really want to see where teams on the Division 1 level are going to be with these new roster limits. Are you gonna pour your money into football? Are you gonna pour your money into basketball? It's open. Is it going to be in volleyball? Is it going to be in softball, baseball? Because some of these sports are going to be easier to finance to the roster limit than other sports will be. So the Temple Pushers are going to have a lot of fun trying to create the money and out-of-state waivers and everything else that you have to do.
Put him in the jumper.
And I still have to figure out how to get NIL.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Brandon, I think you got the audio back there. Let me go ahead and get your thoughts on the game last night with Tennessee State, on just your overall thoughts on the season.
Well, as far as last night, it was a game of mistakes and missed opportunities. When you look at defensively, I thought the defense was able to get a lot done in terms of creating turnovers to help the offense. But when you look at it, it wasn't necessarily the number of mistakes, but when they happen, you have a drive going, you're first and goal, you have a false start, it pushes it back. Next thing you know, you're second and goal with the 17, you end up kicking a field goal instead of a touchdown. You have another drive once you've cut it down to a one-possession game that you've got percolating, and you have a high snap. Oh. And then it becomes from 1st and 10 to 2nd and forever. And you just look at those types of mistakes within the game that really hurt Tennessee State. When you look at, again, I think, and we talked about this in the Gardner-Webb game, after the Gardner-Webb game, I should say, that the kick coverage was a real issue in that game. And we saw it rear its ugly head again, where they were continuously gashed for big returns, and they gave up 2 in the return game, and that proved to kind of be the nail in the coffin. And then the fact that they couldn't run the ball. You end up in negative in terms of trying to run the football, and that really makes you a one-dimensional offense. But with that being said, overall, I think this was a good season for Tennessee State. When you look at what they were able to do in terms of winning a championship that they hadn't won in a quarter century, and not only in terms of wins and everything. So though the season did not have the ending that most of us wanted, I think when you look back on it, it's one you can hang your hat on and hopefully build toward the future.
Great comments, and I wanted to make sure we gave you a chance to share that. So I appreciate it. I know that you're doing multiple things on assignment, in this case assignment in terms of daddy duty. Twins. But we wanted to get you on a little segment. I thought you're pointing in terms of the overall season, but the special team, one that people were missing off was one right before half, where Montana was able to get a field goal out of it in terms of the ability to cover the kickoff when they did the crucial kick. And that was 3-point for the safety. So you're absolutely right when you talk about things that happen in this game, that when you see the defense doing things and the offense coming alive. What was intriguing to me, and I know there's some folks who will see this almost as the poison, rat poison, as we say in another context. But I was watching this game at the same time I'm watching BYU in Houston for various reasons. Obviously, part of that was Colorado. And it's intriguing sometimes when you watch these games and the same type of mistakes are happening in the same time. And you're like, hey, Houston doesn't have enough offense, which they challenged all year long in these parts. But they get a last drive, midfield or whatever. It looks like they're going to be able to flip the script and get in and get into position to get the win. And they have a bad snap and then a fumble by the quarterback that rolls out and basically sets BYU to have the final touchdown to pull the game away. And this was happening simultaneously when you have the bad snap by Tennessee State. And I'm like, oh, this is eerie. So those things always stick with me. But we also get a chance to talk, Brandon. I'm always challenging. I don't know if this is the professor inside me to ask these questions. And thank you all for all of y'all bearing with me when I do this and take you on these exercises. But it came to thought, and I want everybody's thoughts on this, but I'll start with you, Brandon, because I think you have the most rights to really provide opinion on this. But with this level of competitiveness and success, and I'm intrigued by Dave's thought process on this being recently as an independent program outside of the HBCU conferences, if you allow me to use that framework. Again, with the level of competitiveness and success, do you think that Coach Eddie George and the Tennessee State Tigers would gain more coverage, media coverage, if you would, whether it's from ABC, ESPN, and the social media platforms based on what our followers were asking earlier, more coverage if they were in the SWAC playing for a SWAC championship game next week against Jackson State or Southern, or as a member of the MEAC where they would play either Southern or Jackson State if they had already defeated South Carolina State, or if they were in the SWAC, they would be playing South Carolina State in 2 weeks in the Celebration Bowl. It's a loaded question, but people have questioned the media coverage of Tennessee State. My questioning is, does that media coverage change if Tennessee State has a similar level of success or more, obviously, if they were a member of the SWAC and or MEAC? And what do you say about that?
I think definitely, particularly as you would move toward the end of the season, when you look at I'm pretty sure that more people will likely watch the SWAC championship, or if there was a MEAC championship game that was nationally televised, and probably watched us in Montana last night. And then again, you would have that national exposure on the Celebration Bowl, where maybe even people who are maybe familiar with HBCU football, but not into the weeds of it, if you will, would get introduced to maybe an Eric George or a Sanders Ellis, or the journey of Draylon Ellis and what Eddie George has done in transforming the program over the course of his 4 years. Because I think even one with us playing in the OVC Big South, as far as getting attention now, it's just because we're winning. When you're getting your teeth beat in by Eastern Illinois and Seymour and all of these schools, it becomes a talk of, why are y'all in that conference and y'all getting y'all butts whooped every week? So now
I can relate to that. Oh man, I can relate to that one. Whew.
Just a little.
Just a little bit.
So it's like, you're having some success, and now you've somewhat, at least for the time being, put some of those things to bed. But the other question, would be, well, what would y'all do in the SWAC or the MEAC? And y'all wasting all this talent in front of teams that your fans don't care about, and the other team isn't really interested in, outside of maybe if you bring the band. So to button all that up in a neat little package, I definitely think so, because like I said, we're kind of on the outpost in terms of HBCUs. They know we're out there, but because and again, David can relate to this, we're not in the hub of the SWAC or the MEAC in terms of Division I HBCU conferences. I don't want to say we're an afterthought, but it's one that you have to make a little more effort in terms of coverage and checking in on it and things of that nature. So to answer your question, yes.
David, you know I have to come to you to get this thoughts on this, and I know it's unfair to you, and hopefully I'm not putting you in one of those tight spots. But if anybody can handle it from a true open perspective, I believe it's you. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well.
I think that from A&T's perspective, they've being the largest HBCU and the brand that they are, they've been able to navigate relatively well outside of football, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're always going to get the chatter of, well, you could have done that in the MEAC, but this season I can actually respond by saying, well, the MEAC was beaten as worse than the CAA was this year. If you look at the numbers, it's been pretty bad this season. So I don't think it would have mattered if we were in the MEAC, the SWAC. We wouldn't have just been good, period, this year, because I think we're doing a pretty good job against our HBCU counterparts when we do the Aggie Eagle outside of football, right? Like we beat the women's basketball team by 23 points the other day. So like things of that nature, I'm not like worried about it from that aspect. A&T has, as a whole, has done a pretty good job trying to cover it themselves. Mm-hmm. From that aspect, would it be better if we were in the MEAC to a point?
Or probably, the SWAC. We can be wild since everybody wants to play these.
I think geographically that would be a challenge in itself. Right, it was the SWAC. From a brand though, it would be big because A&T is a pretty big brand. Like A&T is one of the big brands at HBCU. Yeah. So I think that would be big if A&T ever went to SWAC, or if it's somebody like a South Carolina State or things of that nature. So I think certain brands it would make it even bigger than what it already is, depending on the conference. Like I think A&T's benefit for being in the CAA. Now you have other schools across the East Coast that know who we are because we play in Boston, we play across the entire East Coast seaboard now in the other sports as well. So
yeah. I've always leaned towards Clark Atlanta and Tennessee State. Mm-hmm. I think that bus is less the building, but you talking about A&T and Tennessee State. Oh my God! In terms of SWAC, that changes the whole thing. So I'm gonna leave it right there because we up against it. So I'm gonna use this as a huge tease because I know Brian and A want to get in this, but you might have to catch them on Sports Wrap. I know they have other things to talk about, but they might decide to talk about this. So if you tune in, you'll get their thoughts on this perspective as well. So that's a huge tease that I'm going to leave you to marinate on the rest of the day to see if they are going to decide to do that. That's purposeful. We kind of connect the dots between our shows in a lot of ways. You see the crossover. But this week coming up, obviously, you had a great show with Carlos Brown yesterday. They'll be back on Saturday. This time, they'll be doing the SWAC championship variation. Obviously, we'll be back on Tuesday. We unveil the mid-major, which should be interesting because you had Miles College losing to Valdosta State, as we said earlier, that AD Drew also echoed, while you had Virginia Union defeating Lenore Ryan. And now you have a matchup between Virginia Union and Valdosta State. How does that reflect on the mid-major poll rankings as we come to a close on that? We'll also get in a chance to talk about fully on Thursday the matchup of the SWAC championship game as we start to creep towards the Celebration Bowl, and the band of the year is tying up in the Nash Bowl. You also get on in G Strike Zone as they start to transition, as they have done a great job all year long in terms of the multiple sports. Put a bow on the volleyball season and the football season as that continues to shake out. Is congratulations to FAMU, the Rattlers out there getting the championship in volleyball. As we start to move towards basketball on the hardwood, a lot of us, except for maybe 3 teams, are officially transitioning to the basketball hardwood court.
Welcome to the couch and welcome to basketball season, ladies and gentlemen.
December 1, basketball season. Let's go.
Listen, just enjoy.
Some of us have been celebrating our basketball season a little bit earlier than others, as Dave is alluding to. Some of it in the positive way, and some of us ready to get to baseball the way basketball is starting off. That means, or softball for that matter. With that being said, thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watson, Charles Bishop, every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock, and then Sunday at 9. I believe Charles and Mike will be off of assignment as I gave them the Labor Day, Thanksgiving Day, and then they decided to be on the road today. But, you know, it is what it is. I'll garnish that check a little bit. Make sure, again, you tune in tonight for Sports Rap with AD, Drew, and Bryan. Besides what I'm trying to influence them to talk about, I'm sure they'll have a lot of great stuff to do as well. Anyway, so and they always have great commentary. But follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Facebook and Instagram. It's DrKenyattacavil, Facebook and YouTube on Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you tune in to BCSN. We have a lot of great things happening, particularly the next couple of weeks. You heard a little bit about the SWAC championship game. We may be doing some special things for that, so tune in to hear about that more. We're certainly going to be in Atlanta for the Celebration Bowl with a lot of opportunities for you to engage with us, so you do that. And then we got some things that we're marinating and working on to see if we can push out for the basketball season. So Black College Sports Network with Roy will be up front to make sure that you continue to get the most live sport based from a talking point and oftentimes from a live broadcast point. So continue to support us on the Black College Sports Network as Roy is putting in a labor of work that many of you would not understand in terms of what he does behind the scenes, and I certainly respect that. So I wanted to make sure we gave him a little love. But again, this is the week that you must recognize in terms of the season changing. It's officially winter, as a cold front is amongst you as the train moves down the track. Wednesday, December 4th is something that you need to pause for and recognize the greatness that is amongst you. With that being said, dream big and continue to move forward as I have these folks with these crazy smirks on their face. Dave trying to keep a straight face. I know Roy back there is cringing, but it is what it is. AD, Brandon, and Rod. We will talk with you soon. Bryan.
Course.
David.
Lecture.
AD and Brandon.
Yes, miss.